We're going to get started in just another minute or two. It's looking like we have a pretty good crowd here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start us off. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the AI Moment in Libraries, what it means for our profession. I'm delighted to see so many people joining us today for what promises to be an important and timely conversation. I'd like to start by thanking the folks who made this event possible, especially our moderator, Dr. Beth Patton, and the team that helped organize it and promote it. These gatherings take thoughtful planning, and we truly appreciate all the effort that went into bringing this together for us. Today's discussion comes at a moment when artificial intelligence is reshaping how we access, evaluate, and share information. For libraries, that really raises profound questions about technology, equity, and the role of human judgment in serving our communities. So it's a critical conversation for all of us who care about access, privacy, and the enduring values of librarianship. So with that, thank you again for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Beth to get us started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for the AI Moment in Libraries, what it means for our profession. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that Syracuse University, the snowy place where I'm speaking from today, sits on the ancestral homelands of the Onondaga Nation, the keepers of the central fire of the Haudenosaunee, and their territory extends across what is now called Central New York. We recognize their ongoing relationship with this land and their continued contributions to our region. We've titled this panel the AI Moment because that's what this feels like, a moment of reckoning for our profession. We've been here before, though, and we want to talk about how we will continue to navigate. AI is already reshaping how people discover information, how libraries operate, how we prepare the next generation of library professionals. But the more we learn about these systems, their biases, their environmental cost, their implications for privacy and equity, the more urgent our professional choices become. Today's conversation brings together library educators and
It's
Beth, you muted.
during a webinar in Syracuse University.
Beth, you're on mute.
Today's conversation brings together library educators and practitioners who are thinking deeply about these questions. We're here to have a conversation about how libraries navigate this moment while staying true to our core commitments. We'll begin with a panel discussion for about 40 minutes, and we'll open it up to questions from the audience. And you can use the chat to ask questions, and please mute yourself. There's a lot of us in here. So I'm grateful to be joined by Sanda Erdelez, a professor and dean of the of the School of Library and Information Science at Simmons University, Leo Lowe, a professor and dean of the School of Library and Information Science at the University of Virginia. David Lankes is the Virginia and Charles Bowden Professor of Librarianship at the University of Texas at Austin, and our own Jeff Saltz, Associate Professor and Program Director for ADS, IS, and our AI Master's Program. So let's get started. Our first segment is going to be a rapid response. Each panelist is going to have 2 to 3 minutes to respond about AI's current impact on library service. So for my panelists, what's one way AI is already changing how libraries serve their communities for better or worse? Sanda, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Beth. And while I'm not a dean at Simmons, at SLIS, at Syracuse, I am proud PhD alumna, just to let everybody know. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity. When I think about AI's impact on libraries, I don't start with thinking of AI in terms of tools or apps. I start with how people's information behavior is changing. This is related to my own area of research. So how they search, how they judge what is true, and how they basically trust what they found. So for the first time, many users are working with systems that don't just retrieve information, but generate it. And that changes our role of libraries and librarianship. We are no longer only curating collections, but we are basically curating algorithms. And this impact looks different depending on where you sit. For example, in academic libraries, AI shows up in discovery systems and research tools. It helps people find connections faster, but it also produces, as we know, many errors and hidden biases. So students and faculty now need help to understand how knowledge is made and not just where to find it. Now, in public libraries, AI supports things like reader's advisory, translation, and accessibility, and it can really open doors to many people. So, but again, it raises questions of privacy and digital equity. And we can also talk about corporate libraries with unique areas of using AI as a part of daily workflow, summarizing reports, spotting trends, organizing data. This makes work of corporate librarians very efficient, but it also brings many new risks, such as confidentiality, intellectual property. So
it's physical evidence you did something. It's physical.
So the impact that we are seeing now isn't one story. It is really many stories across different types of libraries. So for me, the moment where we are right now is about reclaiming that middle space between people and technology in these various contexts. And we are still, as librarians, human interpreters of knowledge. We are the ones who make sense how information is created, how it's shared, how it's trusted. And we need to keep ourselves visible as this environment is very quickly shifting.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Leo?
Well, thank you, Beth, and hello, everyone. I love this question because I am the dean of a library, so I do see it. And couple of reports recently that I think are quite significant, the findings. One is actually from OpenAI. They report that, okay, now there are over 700 million people using ChatGPT. And 80% of all interactions fall into just 3 categories. One is writing, of course. Second is information seeking. And the third is to learn to basically ask ChatGPT to teach them something. So it's become the largest platform for learning and also, in a way, searching as well. So in a way, we are looking at a kind of a transition from I would call it search economy, where, the old Google style, where you type in a keyword and it gives you links and other things. And then we kind of look at the information, evaluate them, and then, get whatever we need from them. And librarians have been teaching people information literacy on how to do that. Now, all of a sudden, even Google now has the AI overview. So from a search where we chase information, it becomes a AI answer economy, where it gives you an overview, it gives you quote unquote an answer, which, sometimes if it's factual, it may be an answer, but a lot of the times it's not, there are no answers for certain things. So how do we teach people to go back a step and then we kind of make the invisible visible again? So I think that's one main part of how librarianship, or how librarians need to kind of think about. Another report is from technology, from Sage. They did a survey of thousands of librarians and students, and they discovered that a lot of students are using ChatGPT, that we know, but only 8% of them got guidance from librarians. So there's a huge gap. And one of the findings is that they do trust librarians, but that there is a gap that we are not stepping up to provide that guidance, which they want, actually. So these are the two things I think are changing how libraries will and can serve our communities.
Fantastic. Thanks, Leo. Dave?
So we worked with Austin Public Library where we were talking about AI readiness and where librarians were. And one of the issues that came out is there are really strong issues for using and not using AI and et cetera. But it came down to the idea that when someone walks into the door, whether that's the door of a public library, a school library, an academic library, they may be there because their resume for a job was never looked at by a human being. They may be there because a loan was turned down by an algorithm. They may have been traced along the way by public cams and people's doorbells. AI is affecting the person who walks into that door. And librarians need to be ready when they seek to serve those folks. They need to understand that is now part of the context. I think the larger question for me is when we talk about AI, we can talk about it as a tool, we can talk about it in different ways and user-based, but I think we need to talk about the concept of corrosive AI. That what we're seeing is a 70-year trend towards lack of trust in government institutions. And AI is now coming to the place at the 70-year mark and throwing gasoline on the fire where we're seeing a degradation of trust in public institutions and governments of all sizes. There is, however, a paradox in there, which is libraries, museums, and archives that are government institutions. There are some that aren't, but school libraries, public libraries, and academic libraries are actually experiencing some of the highest level trust they've ever seen. So you have the idea of this paradox that less trust in government organizations unless they're libraries and archives. And that gives us, I think, a special obligation to help people figure out as we lose trust in traditional organizations and institutions, as it becomes a legitimate thing to say, no, that wasn't me in the problematic experience, that was simply AI, and that to be increasingly believable. As we begin to doubt what we see, as we look at OpenAI releasing their latest version of text to video in a social media wrapper that supercharges fake video into our feeds, I think that it's increasingly important for libraries to be called upon to not simply help serve and find reality, an arbiter of reality to those folks, but also to help shape those organizations, to talk about why is it that libraries are trusted and librarians are trusted, and that halo effect. And just really quickly, we talked to a group called Public AI that wanted to build a public AI system. They came to libraries and said, give us your stuff. We want data. And I said, you don't need our stuff, you need our trust. If you can come to a point where libraries can rely and trust in that system, there's a halo effect that will talk about how people can increasingly trust the tools and the institutions that provide the tools.
Fantastic. Thank you. We got a request for some of the citation around the library, people trusting libraries. I know there's a Pew study, but that was from a couple of years ago. Jeff.
Yeah, so I think, first off, if you think back, it's only been 2 years really since AI has been around, if you will. And so what will it look like in 2 or 3 years? I think that's a fundamental question that we all have maybe beliefs about, but we really don't know. Even the people building the best, largest large language models don't really know exactly what they'll be able to do in 2 or 3 years. So I think that's a fundamental open question that we just have to be comfortable with being at this point. The other thing I'll point out is maybe just to reinforce what Sanda talked about and Leah talked about a little bit, which is this is really the first time libraries have gone from information searching and kind of giving information just through retrieval. And what AI does is then synthesizes that. And that opens up a whole series of questions which libraries need to be at the forefront at, because it's kind of what libraries do, but it's now not just giving sources. It's AI is then integrating those sources, and because it's integrating it based on what it thinks is right, there's all kinds of questions about how it's doing that integration, which raises a bunch of different responsibilities maybe that a library can help with. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I love that. I think so many of us on the panel are educators, and I know a lot of our audience members are, or we are practicing librarians. And so there is a lot of implications for us as educators, for us to think about pedagogy as we're interacting with AI right now. And of course, for folks who are already out in the workforce, right, that means that there is also learning for them to do out in the field in order for us to kind of facilitate some of the things y'all have already mentioned. So my next question is about that. How should LIS programs prepare students for AI integrated library work? What skills become more important? What skills become less important? And if you're already past your MLIS degree, how do you work on incorporating some of those skills now? And Leo, we'll go ahead and start with you this time.
Yeah, so I guess I'm speaking from an employer side. What do I look for when I see somebody applying for library jobs? And a lot of library deans are thinking about AI-specific jobs, but also thinking about how do we have an AI kind of almost like a requirement for all jobs in some ways. But ultimately, at this point, AI is still at a very early stage, so we still need domain knowledge in order to be a good librarian. So that is always important. But at the same time, to be an AI literate person. And of course, there are a lot of different definitions and frameworks out there for AI literacy. I define it as AI literacy is the ability to understand, use, and think critically about AI technologies and their impact on society, ethics, and everyday life. So there are several key components, like you do need to know a little bit about the technical knowledge. You don't need to be a computer scientist, but knowing a little bit about mechanisms. There should be some ethical awareness of all the new questions and dilemmas AI will, raise. Critical thinking, analyzing output, input, information literacy, and then practical skills, using some of the tools that you will need to use, and the societal impact, which is a bigger picture of how we, influence or impact our society, whether it's job displacement, so environmental impact, and other things. And with that, ACRL, when I was the president last year, we set up a task force to develop a set of AI competencies, very specifically for library workers. I think that would be a good place to help take a look at, where, how to gain some of those skill sets. Obviously, that is a living document. We will be, reviewing it all the time to update and make sure that, it's up to date and all of that. So I see a lot of collaboration between libraries and LLS programs to make sure that students can gain those skill sets.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Jeff, you are our program director for our own AI master's degree. So coming from that position, what do you think us as librarians, what kind of skills should we be thinking about as educators and practitioners?
Yeah, so I agree with Leo. I think everybody should have AI literacy. And what does that mean? It means different things to different people, as Leo said. But I think there's some fundamental things about understanding that, as I mentioned before, it's going from information retrieval to information verification, maybe is one way to think about it. And what are the skills necessary to do that? How do you think about using AI in that context? Understanding what AI is. I agree, you don't need to be an expert in how these things are actually built from a technical level, but I think it's really helpful to understand conceptually how these things are built, how they work, what are their limitations, actually equally important. So when we think about bias, like what's generating that bias, right? So it's not that the people creating the models perhaps wanted it to be biased, but what's creating the bias? Because if you don't understand that, then you don't understand where there might be bias and where there might not. So I think raising the bar in terms of what we expect librarians to understand in terms of basic AI usage is really important. And then it gets to what we talked about previously, which is education. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you. And that's perfect because Dave is thinking about AI and teaching right now. Specifically, Dave, I'm thinking about your special collections class, but of course, answer the question however you'd like.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out in university how to teach it, and we're finding out that it's in some ways really helpful to fully embrace AI and fully embrace the old blue books where they're working on stuff disconnected, right? I think there are a couple of main areas that I would hit. For example, in the public, all contexts, the notion of community engagement. That is, as we talk about policies and integration, our librarians and the ones we serve and the staff have to be on board. And how do we have an open conversation of people who may disagree? I think we absolutely need to understand AI is more than commercially provided generative AI. I think within the next year, that's going to become really important as we might be looking at a stock bubble, and we don't want to lose all the great stuff that AI is doing just because OpenAI ran out of money. I think in the digital humanities and in the research area, we're dealing with the issue that these are non-probabilistic models, which is a big fancy way of saying when you run statistics, when you run analysis, when you're doing qualitative work, you're working on systems that at their very heart start with randomness. And how does that change how we think about research results, generalizability, and such? And the last one is really looking at the idea that what actions can be taken here, that there's a social action aspect to this as well. Because if we continue to look at things as sort of inevitable, then we give up the idea that librarians need to make a change to it. So there's some ideas.
Love those. Thank you, Sanda.
Yes, you could probably guess that in my role as a dean here at SLIS, I've spent a lot of time thinking, how are we changing? How are we going to change our curriculum? What students need to know? So 4 points that are like on the top of my mind is that we need to switch from having like a fixed curriculum to more having adaptive pathways. So our traditional LIS programming is designed about a fair, stable set of competencies, cataloging, reference, management, technology. And this model worked when, the profession was changing in the cycle of maybe years, but now AI, as we know, is changing things in month to month. So instead of having some type of very fixed sequence of required courses, we need to be able to provide our students to build more personalized learning routes so that will reflect their own strengths, curiosity, and also their professional goals for some careers that we don't even know what they might be in the future. So, some of them may go in let's say, deep dive into data, machine learning, ethics. Some of them might be more connecting with their more basic content knowledge, expertise of librarianship. So basically, we need to provide that adaptive pathways to students. Another element that I am curious about is that we need to help students understand that AI literacy is a kind of a meta literacy. You need to help students understand how to approach technologies that we haven't met yet. And this is really tricky to do. Good side of this problem is that we are not alone as a source of potential training. Today there are many tech companies, professional associations providing like Google, Microsoft, OpenAI. Everybody's teaching you how to use AI. So knowing how to navigate through these resources and how to integrate them in what is offered in our own programs is another challenge for us. And then finally, one challenge that everybody usually complains about is that in academic environment, we really move rather slow in changing courses, approving new courses, new programs, and we need to improve this logistics, so how things are done so that we can serve not only our current students, but also our alumni better.
Thank you. Sorry, I lost my unmute button. So we've mentioned several things about ethics, equity, community trust came up, and there was a question in the chat about that too. And kind of in this specific political moment, it doesn't feel like we have a lot of trust. And so, I saw, Dave, you commented on that. But the more we know about AI, the encoded biases, the environmental toll, IP theft, privacy violations, access and equities, it becomes clear that anxiety around AI, concern about AI is like not necessary. It is not weird, but maybe just informed professional judgment, right? Like the more we know about AI, the more concerns we should have. So how do libraries lead with our values intact? What do we adopt? What do we resist? And how do we prepare library workers to make these decisions? And Dave, I'll start with you. And I know I saw you responded in the chat, but if you can kind of start there.
Yeah, also I saw a lovely chat about why we're hearing from professors and not frontline librarians, which is a legitimate question, but it is also an iSchool event talking about sort of an academic aspect, and everyone on here represents a holistic view, right? We're doing data, we're in libraries every day, we're gathering, discussing. And one of the things that we found out really quickly when we're doing work with frontline librarians is that they are mixed in their approaches. This isn't like previous technology adoption where it was the Luddites versus those who adopted. These are people who are highly technical and highly understand and are still highly skeptical for all the reasons that you mentioned. And so I think the idea that we need to look, for example, Leo, I just want to point out the great work that you've done with ACRL and literacy. However, a lot of AI literacy has a sense of inevitability in it. That is, you better do it because it's coming anyway. And I think that abdicates way too much of the responsibility of libraries to gather and activate community voices in what they do. At universities here at Texas, we're building our own AI systems for tutoring and for search and for research to ensure that they're done ethically, for example. We know that the electrical and environmental impact of commercial AI is huge, but we also know that it is getting more efficient every day, just like we saw in information retrieval. I think the idea of not starting with the sense of inevitability, not looking at AI just as a tool, but as a larger social impact, not taking the idea that we know exactly what's going to happen, but gathering from a community voice and creating fora in which all these voices can come and safely have a conversation, from skeptical to the person who wants to have it, and play with these things. I don't think, back to what people need to know. Frontline librarians need to know the impact of AI and how AI works. And then they need to know enough that if they're going to change policy or fight policy, that they understand how they do it. So for me, the answer is not to ignore this, not to take AI as inevitability. We're already seeing laws passed that will prevent minors from using these tools. We're seeing, right, these can change. Society and communities at all levels can make decisions about how this tool will be used or have impact within our universities, within our K-12 schools. Librarians desperately need to be at that table, not because it's a power thing, partly because it's a power thing, but because we do have experience in how we evaluate it. We can talk about negative consequences of hallucinations, and we can talk about these things at a serious level so that when we do endorse or utilize a tool, we feel confident from our own professional and values of how that works.
Thank you. It's, Dave and I have a podcast, Libraries Lead, and we talk about AI every month. And so it's been interesting to watch Dave's skepticism grow the more and more I talk to him. Jeff, what concerns you? What should we be worried about? What should we hold on to? What should we let go?
So I think anxiety is justified maybe. So I don't think people should apologize for having that feeling. And there's probably other words that we could use that maybe don't have even a slightly negative connotation, because I think it's maybe caution or kind of making informed consent might be a different way to think about it. And maybe just to think about things slightly differently than what David talked about, which is, I do think it's inevitable. The question is, what is it? So I think you can't put AI back in a box and say we're never going to use it. We can in some situations. Blue Book is a great example, right? So you can think about the environment and how to control for it. But I think broadly speaking, there will be AI. The question is how will it be used? What type of systems there'll be? What kind of safeguards there'll be? And there's lots of different potential visions of that future. I don't think it's clear yet what that'll look like. And you can just think back to previous technologies and safeguards that have been fully adopted. GDPR is kind of a very simple example where, the fact that companies have data, that kind of, like, you can't stop that, but you can put guardrails around it. So who has what data is being used, how is it being used? You can think of similar types of analogies that might come to bear in AI. So I think it's being proactive about what it should be, as opposed to being like, it's going to happen or it's not going to happen.
Thank you. Leo? Oh, sorry. Well, Sanda was next. I apologize.
Nah,
Sanda.
that's okay. That's okay. So AI anxiety. I did observe this, and I'm observing this clearly both among our faculty and students. But when I think about AI anxiety, I basically don't see it as a weakness, but as a form of, let's call it informed professional judgment. So librarians are trained to notice bias, to understand provenance, to think about the issues of unequal access to information. And these are basically instincts that are exactly needed when we evaluate AI systems and try to figure out how this still unknown territory is going to work out. So at SLIS, when students, for example, question the system's training data or ask why a model produced a certain summary, I don't really see this as a fear. I feel that this is almost that we succeeded. They're demonstrating their expertise or developing expertise in action. Now, another side of how we can contribute more and build on this anxiety, potential anxiety, is to develop additional transparency and let's call it new service ethics in our field. So because historically libraries and librarians had earned public trust because we made knowledge systems transparent. So we can also make this and continue doing this with AI environment, starting small, documenting prompts, creating trustworthy explanations of models so that our anxiety turns into action that will create trustworthy environment and us as producers of that trustworthy environment for our users.
Thank you so much. And Leo?
So I also recognize a lot of these tensions because I do work with a lot, librarians, and I think when I became the dean at my place, a lot of people were worried. He's going to force us to use AI and all of that, or replace us with AI. But I want to try to acknowledge that, some of these tensions, and I struggle with these as well, like, innovation versus caution and efficiency and equity, empowerment versus exploitation. But one thing I've noticed is that a lot of these questions that we have of AI is mostly human decisions and not the technology itself, right? How data were collected, these are human decisions. Humans decide to, we just scrape the internet for everything. The compute power to make it as large as possible, these are human decisions. And jobs, are they replacing people? These are CEO decisions. So in a way, we should separate those two things. That the technology itself, I'm very optimistic, and I think it will create, really positive impact on the world if we do it right. But it's the human part that we want to be able to influence, advocate for, and shape that. And one way of doing that is to be engaged with it. For example, do we want these really large models just, using a lot of energy and building all these data centers when there could be other ways of doing things? I think a lot of us are not convinced that that's the only way of making AI work. And like David said, a lot of universities, like UT and UVA too, we're experimenting with different types of training models. What if we use heavily curated data, heavy metadata, training, and maybe we could, develop something a little bit better. Therefore, I think librarians and library science professionals, researchers, can really play a part in that, in the development of AI models to, to make the future that we want.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and such a good point for us to think about. I do think that there is, as y'all have kind of pointed to, and people in the chat too, a fair amount of techno-determinism, and like this is going to be a thing, and this is a terrible question to ask on the back end of that. But I'm gonna stop our organized questions with the panel and turn it over to Q&A after this. But I want you all to make some quick predictions. So what's one thing, sorry to be deterministic, what's one thing that libraries must do, and it could be shun it, regarding AI in the next 2 years? And Jeff, we'll start with you.
I think what I would say is raise the level of knowledge so that we're having this conversation. And if this conversation was pervasive through society, both in terms of how to use AI appropriately, but also how to think about, what Leo was talking about. It's like, it's not the technology, it's how people are choosing to use them, and there's alternatives. So if there's one thing that could be done, like everybody kind of looks to libraries to raise the level of knowledge in the population, I think that would be amazing.
Perfect. Thank you. Sanda?
I could build on this to say maybe in one sentence, make AI literacy core, not something that is optional. So we need to make AI literacy in the next 2 years, not even in the next 2 years, in the next couple of months, how things are changing fast, a core of our professional skill set, not as a side project that somebody who is curious and tech savvy would like to do, deal with anxiety as a power rather than as a weakness. Every library worker, from those who work on the front desk to those who in the back side of the office, directors, everybody encounters AI, whether we realize that they do or not, either through search systems, chat interfaces, behind the scenes automation, and there are really no excuses whatsoever that the AI literacy should not become a core requirement.
Thank you so much. Leo?
So from an organization's perspective, I think libraries need to be AI ready. So a colleague and I developed this 3C framework. One is clarity. We need to know why we're doing this, what are we doing it for, basically. And then capacity. Do we have the skills and infrastructure to really do that? Staff need time, training, access to tools so they can learn and engage. And then finally, culture, which is probably the hardest part. How do we have that environment where people are allowed to, test, even question, and learn together? So trying something new is always, scary. And so how can we make that make it easier for our staff? If we can get these things right, I think we'll be ready.
Thank you. Dave?
I think first, you talked about my road. It's not to AI skepticism. I think it's to AI realism. I'm a big proponent of AI in lots of different ways. I use it to write a book that I just put in on a regular basis and teach it. But the way that you get there is you engage. You engage things like University of Texas began using AI to generate metadata for records on materials they would never get to in 100 years. And inside the records, they put confidence intervals so that they can go revisit them as the technology gets better. The idea of a confidence interval in metadata records, I mean, they're more core geeky librarian, but that's what they're trying, that's what they're playing with. I think the digital humanities is also a place to look at how we can support this. And on the public side, public policy debates right now, at the state level, at the local level. This is where AI regulation is occurring. This is where AI investment is coming. And libraries are being invited in. Talk to your state libraries, talk to your large urban libraries, make sure you represent your small rural libraries, and know what the conversation is and be informed enough to do it. And so it's not AI literacy where you read a book on AI. right? It's using that AI literacy and then going to play with it and try it and hack at it and see what it can really do.
I love that. It's fair. I'm the skeptic of our group and not you. I think that my ways may be rubbing off on you, and I think part of that, right, is also me trying. And so it's hard, and I think it's important, right, that I'm not just critiquing and pushing back, but that I'm like investigating and interacting, which helps me be more critical, I think. So I followed a couple of questions in the chat that I jotted down, although we've kind of addressed some of those. I have one that I want to bring up because I think it's really interesting for us to think about. We've talked a lot about, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who brought this question up in the chat, but it's about the difference between individuals and collections of people. And then I also think the difference between the responsibility of us as users, us as practitioners, us as educators, and maybe, Dave, to what you were just talking about, the policies and the companies that are also running AI. And so we've really talked about just the responsibility for us as users, practitioners, but what about their responsibility? What about the collective responsibility? And they brought up Heather McGee's book, The Sum of Us, which is, I'll plug that book, an amazing book, What Racism Costs Us All and What We Lose when we think of things in terms of individually instead of collectives. So how do we think about the collective? How do we either think of us as a community and how we interact with AI, or how do we think about pushing back against or embracing tech companies in doing this? And I'll just throw that out there to the panelists for whoever wants to jump in.
Maybe I'll start on your last part, which is the tech companies part. So I think they're not motivated to have the discussions that we're having here, for example. They're motivated rationally from their side, but they're motivated by different things. And so I think there needs to be a way to ensure the conversation is balanced across big tech and not big tech. And there's been lots of discussions here about how that might be. So there's lots of views about AI and using smaller models as a simple example, which big tech does not like for lots of financial reasons. And then there's a whole question about what data is okay and how to reduce bias. So I think there's a whole set of questions that large tech has not wanted to address, and it's been before AI. So AI is just kind of like just another step along the path. But I think I don't want to have it as us versus them, but we should understand motivations of different groups of people, maybe is a good way to say it.
If I could add, I see there are many layers of zone of intervention. And normally, let's say Dave spoke about zone of intervention at the level of policy being present, which is great. We clearly need to be there. And this is where typically we are for many other topics. But what I would really like to see is zone of intervention when these systems are just being developed, like way, way, way back down there. Send our guys, our girls and people to be when the system is being developed, when data is being collected, put into these systems to be trained, ensure quality, ethics, and all the good things that we talk about there. This is my challenge. I would like to prepare some of our students who are willing to do that to take on these positions and make employers understand that they could benefit if they get our students into those positions. I think this will prevent many issues down the line, basically, that we don't need to resolve later.
Yeah, I also, I just finished writing my manuscript last night about knowledge destruction and epistemicide. And one of the things that we've been thinking about as a strategy for resistance is like institutional procurement, right? And so us thinking about which companies we're doing business with, who we're giving money to, and kind of thinking about, you know, the iSchools as a coalition and a collective of us thinking about which institutions and companies are we going to work with, and thinking about how we, you know, financially support some organizations or others, perhaps based on some of our ethical values and concerns. Okay, I have some more questions, and I'll do my best. I am going to save the questions in the chat and the comments in the chat and try to kind of summarize some of those for us down the road. First, let's see, we have a question. I'm part of a small group at Franklin Pierce University leading a campus-wide AI adoption effort. Do you have recommendations or things to avoid on how to make progress with so many stakeholders? How to gather information, communicate progress, and build environments and permission for experimentation?
That's a big question. There are a lot of sub-questions, but I can share a little bit about my experience. I don't know if I can answer all of them because we are all trying things out. So at my previous institution, I'm glad that you're on that committee or group, because I think it's a really good opportunity for libraries to play a leadership role in that. We are the connective tissue in some ways that we work with everybody. So if you have that desire, play that up a bit more and use the libraries to convene a lot of these either meetings or conversations. And we have a lot to offer. Like, a lot of us have talked about how information discovery has changed, and that is a big concern for a lot of faculty and students. How do we verify information? And in that way, it's kind of the spotlight is on information literacy. It's on us. I'll say, please grab that opportunity and make us the heroes in this world. Use that, and then from my own experience is that a lot of people who are not interested or like, no, I don't want to even think about it, I would not spend too much time or energy on that specific population, and spend more time on people who are already interested or at least curious. And then you can get buy-in from them, and hopefully they can talk to their peers. And then given time, people would be a little bit more open to trying new things. But like like David and other panelists have said, we do need to engage with it, whether you're for it or against it, or how do you feel about it, is that we do need to learn more about it so we can kind of make informed decisions.
Leo, we used exactly the same approach here at Simmons. Basically, for willing faculty, about a year and a half ago, we purchased ChatGPT Teams and got needed to get permission from our IT team that this is okay to do as an acquisition and spending money, and let them try it out so they can talk from experience. And the same way with students, many of you probably know about ACEST. For the second year in a row, they have idea workshop, basically where there is like a whole week of activities involving AI. Last year, we we asked students, it's free for you to attend. Let us know if you want to go. We got about a dozen. We paid for them to go. This year, about 30 of them signed up. So we need to put also money where we want to invest if they're willing people to take interest. And start with these groups, and then others, either willingly or unwillingly, at some point we'd also get on board. So yeah, very similar approach.
Maybe one thing to add. So obviously I definitely agree with Leo and Sanda that experimentation is really important. Focus on people that want to do it, but encourage people that maybe don't think it's valuable to at least prove to themselves that it's not valuable. And the thing that I would stress is that learn from those experiments. So don't just have people go off and try things. It's like, what are we collectively learning? That's probably even more important than people trying it. because collectively learning might be that somebody thought it was useful, somebody thought it had bias. And so there's lots of different ways that people can learn from that, but I think the learning is really important.
Yeah, I'll just finish up because it was a university context, and to say that right now, faculty are hurting. They are confused. They know that they are getting a lot of AI in their flow, and they don't know how to detect it or what to do with it or to encourage it. I have students who are telling me things like, I did it and I think I'm cheating, even though you told me not to. And I think that that is a strong connection point. If you begin at the teaching and classroom environment to begin talking about, yes, how libraries can support it and experiment with it, but specifically acknowledge the fact that right now our faculty are dealing with AI slop in homework and AI slop in their research, and massive questions about how we do scholarly communications in this world, of which libraries need to be right at the front of that. We cannot play the institutional repository game where we just wait to see how people are going to do open access and then we'll figure out what we can do, and we end up creating big databases that are great for AI to scare. We need to be right in the middle and say, right now, we have a human peer review process which is under stress and about to break. We have a classroom model which is under stress and about to break, and both of those have fundamental aspects of librarianship. Let us work together on this.
Thank you so much, y'all. It's so informative and has me thinking about a lot of different ways that we can approach this and get buy-in and also push back. I think this is a really great question, and it's kind of around the intersection of AI and critical thinking. So there's been a lot of emphasis on the importance of education and training, and I don't agree. I mean, I don't disagree. Sorry. But we know that there are certain types of issues where and communities where people don't necessarily change their mind when presented with new information. If you haven't read New Shit Has Come to Light in Information Behavior, it is a really great paper about when people cannot process new information. I'll drop the link in the chat. But so even when they're presenting with new information, they can't change their minds. People experience backlash, and they're concerned that we as libraries will do what we often do, is rely heavily on education and rational approaches to folks who may not be completely rational in how they're interacting with information. And so this person is asking, have you heard of any arts or humanities approaches that can allow us to diversify our methods in promoting critical thinking and AI literacy in libraries? And again, that's a lot of components, but I think a really fascinating question. Thank you for that.
I also lost the button.
Happens.
Yeah, really what I think I'm thinking of, I got to find his name. Todd, is it, at Illinois. He does work in digital libraries. He's in the iSchool there, and he's having a real interesting time working on how you teach these areas, how you research in these areas. I'm going to find the link and put him in there because, he's talked about now having, for the first time in years, a computer-free classroom to do this, right? Not this, technology is never whatever. It's like, this is what's happening in this environment. And this is how I look at it in this environment. This is how I impact it in that research. And so I think I'm going to put a link, and my short answer is follow him.
Sanda or Leo?
I'm thinking it probably would deserve the whole another workshop or webinar to think through this. Like this competition between rational explanation and more emotional way how we interact with information is, if we knew the magic bullet how to resolve it, I'm sure we won't have as many problems we are currently having in the political area. I would say not as a solution, but as somebody who studies human information behavior, I feel that this is part of where we maybe failed in the research, that we have studied more processes and only a little bit emotional component. Our field of LIS has studied information behavior from historically from the process and cognitive side. There have been some attempts to bring in more emotional component and social component, but I don't feel we ever operationalize it in a way how we did with various models of information behavior that are very functional models. So I'd say we need to study more. We need to apply more social science methods, figuring out why people do what they do and do these fast, and then come up with some solutions. I don't have right now answers what works and what doesn't work yet without additional investigation.
Yeah, I think we'll have to have several more panels on this. I think there's enough questions and comments in here for us to keep this going. Leo?
I'll just add a little bit. I think from the very beginning, I quickly realized this is more than just digital transformation. It is change management. And every time there's a major technology disruption, there's always a bit of a social lag. It will take some time. So time it can help. But then this thing is happening so fast. So how can we deal with it? I try not to, even though I come in, to our organization as a very positive about the technology, I try to create a environment where there is some psychological safety in that people can question it. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, even though I think it will have a positive impact in the long term, in the short and medium term, we don't know how this is going to work out. And I think it is right to question it. But how do we make sure that they can actually do that? But at the same time, how can I protect their jobs and other things where, because I don't know what's going to happen either. So how can we, kind of address or even just acknowledging there are these tensions? That's what I'm trying to do, is that provide some kind of emotional support as we move forward.
Yeah, I really wanted to merge the last 8 questions we have into one really super complex question, but I don't think we have time for that. But I am going to kind of leave us thinking about something though. Wrapping up from a couple of questions is what organizations should libraries be thinking about partnering with besides big tech companies? We got a question about how are libraries thinking about navigating these tools and providing them for their students and faculty. It's not cheap or free. So how are we thinking about managing those as resources? And then we got a question that I think everybody wants to know is which jobs is AI gonna replace? And I don't know that any of the 4 of you have that specific answer, but like I said, I'd like to keep this conversation going. Thank you so much, Sanda, Leo, David, and Jeff. The conversation has underscored something really important. Our AI anxiety is not irrational. It is informed judgment about all of the things that we're navigating against, and that we don't have to inherently take hard stances, and that maybe the middle ground is the right way. Some exploration, working on understanding and integration, and thinking about the sociology of it, as Sanda said, and thinking about those relationships with our community. We're not facing simple choices between adoption and resistance, but we're navigating those questions about what we want to adopt, how we want to adopt, and how we're going to prepare our students to make these decisions as we're moving forward. And not problems we can solve in an hour, probably even in a semester, but I think ongoing commitments for us to continue to have these conversations. So thanks to everyone that is here, whether you're a student trying to figure out what skills to build on, an educator redesigning curriculum, a practicing librarian making real-time decisions about patrons' use. Thank you for showing up and participating in this conversation. The fact that you're here asking hard questions, listening to us try to answer these hard questions, are demonstrating how important this moment is for us. I will try to write some kind of summary of this conversation for us and send it back out to our followers so you have a link to some of the resources and some of the larger questions that we've asked. I encourage you to continue these conversations in your institutions, in your classrooms, and in your communities. Thanks so much for spending your, well, if you're on the East Coast, maybe thanks so much for spending your lunch break with us. Be well. Have a great afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all. That's how I end the podcast. Bye, y'all. Thanks, Dave. That was funny.